I think we should start. Good morning and welcome to day two of the Apprenticeship Diversity and Social Mobility Forum, brought to you by the BAME Apprenticeship Alliance. I hope you're all keeping well. So the title of this session is Deconstructing Social Mobility and the Attainment Gap Challenges, and it's quite important today, especially with the news around A-level and GCSE results and how the gap between attainment and predicted grades and all this news is coming out now is quite important, this topic anyway, but it's just risen to the surface even more. But today's guest speaker is somebody who's probably really inspired me more than anything in the last month, because his book, in fact, I've got it on my Kindle here, is about called People Like Us, and I don't get my page, but and it's he's a broadcaster, he's a barrister, and he's a recent author of this book called People Like Us, what it takes to make it modern Britain. But his story is really unique as well, because he came to the UK as a young refugee without his parents, grew up in some of the deprived areas of northwest London, being raised exclusively on estate benefits. And his book talks about his journey and the lessons learned along the way, and assesses the issue of social mobility in modern Britain today. And that's what we're talking about today. So Hashi, hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Isa, and I'm really glad to be here with you guys on your second day of your conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Firstly, Hashi, how's the last few months been for you?
Yeah, I mean, the last few months have been quite surreal, as is the case for everyone. The first thing to just say is that, you know, my family and I and everyone is safe and healthy, which is something that is for a lot of people out there, so we're very, very lucky. Secondly, I ended up spending a lot of time at home, so I started doing a lot of chores and random things that I left to chance and not really focusing on. And then I spent a lot of time exercising and cycling, and I'm hoping that I'm physically more fit as a result. But it has been quite a surreal time. It's good to be slowly getting back to normal.
Yeah.
Whatever that normal feels like, and yeah, it's a mixture of blessings and surrealness.
Yeah, it's a quite reflective time as well, which is what a lot of people have realized as well, which is good. It's good. Hashi, so I've been reading your book quite closely over the past month, and so it really, in my opinion, deconstructs social mobility for what it really is. And so in your book, you talk about recognizing the starting point, and it's just as important as recognizing the end goal, particularly for young people and individuals. So I want to begin with your starting point. How did you end up a refugee in London, leading to your journey to becoming a barrister?
Yeah, it's a very good question as a starting point. I mean, I was born in Kenya to Somali parents, and we were living there for the first few years of my life, which were sort of the late 80s, early 90s. And my father was the first person to leave Somalia in my family's history and seek his sort of future in another country, where he met my mum in Kenya. They got married and started having children and starting a family there, whereby soon after, really, it became a situation where in the early 1990s, a series of facts and factors collided in such a way that in a space of 2 years, you had a situation where the Somali state collapsed and a civil war had broken out in the country from which my parents had come, and to which they were hoping to return after a number of years of establishing some sort of business and you know, livelihood in Kenya. But within 2 years, the collapse of the Somali state was then subsequently followed by the death of my father through a car crash in Kenya. And most of his families then sort of descended onto Kenya to seek asylum, and Ethiopia and various other places. And then as a result of then my father dying and us being left on our own without any sort of income, given that my mother, who had never been formally educated, who had never learned how to read and write, who'd given birth to 12 children, was left to essentially fend for herself. And there was a decision had to be made in relation to what would happen next. And given that a lot of my half siblings, some of my cousins and others, were seeking asylum in other countries, including America, the US, and elsewhere. We followed this wave of people who were trying to get anywhere but Somalia to seek out a new beginning and a new life. And so as a result, we ended up in Northwest London in the early 1990s in the most grim set of circumstances. But when you're poor and you don't have much, you don't really know that. And so in many ways, it's a sort of a blessing that you have that ignorance. And yeah, we ended up in Northwest London, near Wembley, where I still live today, and I'm talking to you from there today. And I guess the rest, as they say, is history. Isa, I think you're mute.
I am indeed, yes. So and that journey to becoming a barrister was quite a unique one because, as you've mentioned, it's not the conventional journey to becoming a barrister as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you think about it, nobody in my family had a professional job. I didn't know what a barrister did, let alone how to become one. I'd never met a barrister. I didn't know what the routes were. I didn't know sort of what skills you needed to become a barrister, what kind of work experience was required to get into the kind of process of learning more about that profession, and much, much more besides. So actually, in many ways, it was the most unlikeliest of career choices for anybody like me, who not only did I not have the kind of wherewithal, knowledge, expertise, experience of any kind of that profession, but I also lacked a great deal of connections and family sort of connections, cultural capital, social capital, and everything else that's required to break into one of those so-called top professions in this country.
Oh, fantastic. So if I just on, and it was mentioned yesterday in terms of scholarships and sponsorships, how important was that to your journey in terms of when you received scholarship? Because it was mentioned by one of our speakers yesterday, but because it's quite important to your journey.
Massively important. I mean, scholarships are critical because for a lot of people who are coming from very poor backgrounds, and I'm sure a lot of the people on this conference call will understand and appreciate, coming from a very difficult background where finance, for example, is a big issue, where money is a central part of the day-to-day existence, being able to pursue your career choices without having to worry about whether or not you can financially afford to is a big, big issue. And so scholarships for individuals who want to pursue their dreams, who have the talent to pursue their dreams, who have the discipline and the determination to succeed, not being hampered by virtue of just simply not being able to afford it, is a huge part of social mobility. And also people say, well, if you're going to be a barrister and you have to pay a certain amount of money to get into the profession, well, that's part of the process and that's part of the sacrifice that you're making. Well, those people don't understand what it feels like to be growing up precarious. They never fully appreciate what it feels like to be growing up poor. They never fully comprehend the fact that when you are growing up poor and with very little in terms of any sort of financial aid, you grow up with a mindset that then makes you much, much more risk averse, much, much more keen on just getting out and working rather than spending more money on a degree that you may or may not get a job for. So I think sponsorship and scholarship, in terms of the scholarships that are out there, are hugely important. Sponsorship in terms of people who believe in you, people who give you work experience, people who you mix with, people who guide you through the kind of professions that you don't know anything about, many of whom I was very, very lucky to have the benefit of. For those of you who are interested, I interviewed the people who helped me through that process when I was younger for a Radio 4 documentary called Adventures in Social Mobility, which is available on BBC Sounds. And I interviewed some of those people to sort of say, what did you think about helping me? Why did you want to help me? What was it that you were seeking to do? And they were phenomenally helpful, So have a listen to that, because I think scholarships are critical because they help people not be able to be hampered by anything other than their ability to succeed. But sponsorship is also key because it allows you to plug that hole of lack of knowledge that you might have about what you're trying to do.
And in the realms of apprenticeships and skills and young people, I think that's quite important when it comes to that work experience aspect of it, because of how the structures of employment skills is now, with people leaving school and not having that early experience. I think scholarships can play quite a significant role in that transition as well.
Absolutely.